the church warden of St Mary's, Prittlewell, which is the church you're in at the moment. I've been doing this job for 8 years, and not because I'm good, it's just that no one else wants to do it. So it's a voluntary role, and I've been retired a little while, so I've decided to come and help out in the church and do whatever I can. The church warden's role, we're responsible for everything to do with the building, the upkeep, the maintenance, and the general running of the church. Anything to do with God and services, that's down to the vicar. He takes care of all of that. So in the sky is the vicar, on the ground is the church wardens. That's where we are basically with this. There's been a church here for over 1,400 years or so. When it first started, it was a very small chapel, and it would have looked something like this. I don't know if any of you are familiar with St Peter's in the Wall. Yeah, it would have looked like that. It would have been a basic ground Saxon type chapel. And as we go round, just over there in the corner, there's an archway, and that's the original entrance to the Saxon church that was here. As you go around, there's a lot of work going around, and they're putting up a stage in. The reason for the staging is tomorrow. There is this event going on, the Land of the Book. If you're interested in that, if I just pass this round, you just take one and pass it around. I don't know how many are there. That gives you some information of the event that's taking place tomorrow. You're welcome to come along to that. Details of how to do that are on that sheet there. As we go along, if you want to ask any questions, just ask the questions. No need to put your hand up and just shout out. If I don't know, I will find out and come back to you. I'll email Sue with the answer, and we'll find out together what that question is. Most of the questions I get asked, I add to what I call my golden eagle list. And the reason I call it that is because over in the corner is the golden eagle, over that side. And someone asked me why churches have golden eagles as a lectern to put their Bibles on. And the reason I discovered was the fact that that's the bird that flies the highest in the sky and was considered to be the bird nearest to God, to take the word of God from God to man. So that's why we have the golden eagle. It's associated with John from the Gospels, and every time you see a picture of John, there is a golden eagle somewhere in that picture, so they go together. Most of what you see here is a 1870 late Victorian restoration. There's very little of the original church left in terms of furniture and wealth and goods and treasures, but there is still the architecture around from the periods, giving us an idea of the different stages of the life of the church. So, mostly, just briefly, we have the Saxon archway, then we have the Norman nave, which is just on the other side of these pillars, running down to the back. And then there was an addition to the Norman nave was this part, which is the Jesus Guild added in the 1700s. And then in the 1500s, the tower and the porchway were added as a Tudor, sort of just over the Tudor dates add-ons. So it's been a bit of a mix-mash of the churches. So what we'll do is we'll have a walk round. If you're able to walk, that's fine. If not, stay where you are. And as we go round, I'll talk about the windows, and we'll talk about the history, and we'll talk about the architecture as we go on. The stones that you see were originally covered in white plaster. Like most churches, there was a white plaster, and there was decorated drawings on all around over the period of time. That plaster has since been taken off and never been replaced, revealing the stones, which I think brings its own kind of beauty to the church. This is Kentish ragstone you're looking at. It's built, this particular Norman arch was built at the same time as the White Tower in the Tower of London, around about 1100s, 1000s, something like that. I've got the dates if you need all the dates. I'm not very good at getting
when it's to do with the Normans, didn't they come over and get involved?
The Normans came over, yeah. You've got Saxons, Normans, Plantagenets, Tudors. So we've got quite a range of history. Then you've got Elizabethan, Edwardian, and obviously Victorian, right the way through to the modern day. Most of what you're looking at here is late Queen Victoria, late Victorian.
Thank you.
So, any questions before we have a little wander back?
Thank you.
Okay. First thing we're going to look at is this window here. So, if we all now sort of move that, we'll go over to that window there. We'll have a talk about that window.
Well, I wanted to ask about those stairs, and I'm sure you told us before, but I can't remember which.
Good question.
Go on, then.
I'll tell you about the stairs when we get there.
I'm not going up there, but I'd like to know.
Don't go. can check with where we are. Okay, let's come down here. Or wherever you see that. We'll talk about the stairs in a minute.
Sorry.
Let's talk about the structure of where we are. You asked about the stairs. The stairs used to go up to the top of the pulpit there, and then there was a balcony across the front called a rood screen.
What?
A rood screen, R-O-O-D. That's old speak for cross. You've heard of the town hall in Ireland, Holy Rood, that means Holy Cross. And anything to do with rood, R-O-D is cross. And the rood screen was to cover the altar from the eyes of the human public, for public people, and to keep it kind of a mystery veiled in. You see it in quite a lot of churches, certainly in Westminster Abbey, although that's not a church. You can see the different styles of rood screens there, obstructing the view and keeping secrecy. Now, the reason it's so high up is because, I don't know if you noticed, when you came in, you came down the ramp, because the original floor height was this height. So this is the original floor height. So you can now see that those windows and those stairs actually make sense. And what's happened is, over a period of time, they've dug out the church and lowered it to allow for ducting and heating and various groundworks to be done. There is no vault underneath this church, although there are some bodies which I'll talk about in just a sec. So the floor was lowered, so you actually come in, you come down the ramp, and although you don't notice it, you're walking up the slope, because if you look at that door there, that's at ground level, 2 steps up, and those, just behind the piano, there's plug sockets, and they're actually on the ground level, although we're a couple of feet down. And if you look at the bottom of all the pillars, like this one, you can see that this is actually where the ground was here. So the pillar would have been on the ground here, and this is the foundation which has been underneath the ground, which has been exposed when they lowered the floor. There's been a lot of structural changes over the years in the church. One of you, if you've been here before, or you came in the past, you would have remembered, maybe not, that these pews actually came right to the front here, where I am now. They came to about here. So all the pews came to here, right to the front there, just along those steps. And it left us very little room, certainly for the main stage, to actually do any ceremonies or services or weddings, and as weddings got bigger, schools came in, plays, etc. We felt that it was necessary to take the pews out and extend the floor. So all these frontals have been moved back and repositioned. That frontal there where we were sitting, that's actually the front of the choir stalls, which used to be up there in front of those front benches there. And we've adapted it to make it a pew front to just finish off the look of the church here. This is the mayor's pew, this particular one, because obviously it's the main church of the city, and all the mayor's services are done here in this church. I think mainly because it can hold so many people. It can hold about 500 people. So whilst we were...
Is it busy here? Is it a busy church?
It is a busy church, but it's busy in various ways. It's busy in the evenings, it's busy in the week, and Sundays the congregation is about 80 to 90 people, so it's quite a lot of people. And they're all different types of people. They're not all like one set. They're all different types. And we have a varied worship. We have a children's and family worker who works in the school, but she also does services on a Sunday for the children's and the families and parents and stuff. So it's a very broad church. That's the term. You'll notice that the tiles here match the tiles there, but actually these are all new. All these tiles are new, and where the brass plaques are, they are bodies underneath. So if you're not squeamish, anybody squeamish?
No, we want to look.
You want to look? When we dug up the when we dug up the
don't mind the bones.
okay, that's nice. When we dug up the floor, we discovered 13 burials, and one of them was right here in front of me. Was here. This is a new plaque which we put in because the body that was here, underneath the vaulted chamber, had a lead plaque still on it from the original coffin. So we were able to find out her name and the dates when she was buried. And we were able to put a plaque here for Sarah Coon. So she is literally physically underneath here. So underneath that plaque, discovery. So what you're looking at here, this part here, is that part of the floor there. Pass it round. That's the initial. She's covered in polythene while we were doing the building work to protect her. And then this one here shows just a little bit of the lead plaque from the coffin there and the actual body itself underneath there. So there are 13 or so different piles of bits and pieces of bodies. That being the only one we can identify to give her a new brass plaque to bring her back to life in the history of the church.
So when was she buried there?
1771. So.
Must have been important.
Yes, she must have been important. That's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
She must have been important to be buried here, yeah. So she must have been a dignitary, or maybe she owned the land. She was like one of the big families who owned the lands, and people came. Because obviously, you know, in the medieval times, you had to come to church as part of the agreement of being on the land. The landlord or the manor, you had to come to his church and he would provide.
Thank you.
Taking notes. Yeah, good idea.
Because we have to do a run.
I know.
There are some guidebooks at the back which you can take.
All right.
So,
We get home and we say to each other,
What happened? Yes.
let's have a quick look at this window before we move on. This window is quite unique. It was exhibited in Kensington in an exhibition and then taken away, brought back again. And it's listed here in the exhibition, the Royal Academy of Arts in 1941. And this window won a prize. It's quite unique because it shows St Francis of Assisi, obviously, with all the animals, and Hubert the hunter, St Hubert the hunter, and that's his dog with him there, hunting dog. All the way around the outside of the windows is like a calendar of works that you need to do during the year to look after your lands. So it starts off with ploughing and gardening and planting. It goes all the way around to the nativity scene here at Christmas. And each of the panes has the months, it has the zodiac sign for that month, and it has the animals that you're likely to see at that time of year in that stained glass window. So we've got snails and hedgehogs and all sorts of animals down here, partridges and so on and so forth. Just in the middle here, this one here with the red cloak, that's got Rochford Hall. That's Rochford Hall, as you know, that's where Anne Boleyn was brought up and raised. And the Boleyn family lived there during that time.
when was that window done?
That window was done in the 19... I have got all the windows.
Just roughly.
I've got them all written down somewhere.
Yeah. Date, I'll just be doing that's fine.
There you go. Put my eyeballs on so I can see what I'm doing.
I know.
All these windows are Victorian illusions, if you like, for want of a better...
They didn't have television, did they?
No, exactly. So this window here is 1946.
19.
It was put in there. Although it was exhibited in 41, 5 years later it was bought and put in the church in 1946.
What was that before?
There before, you can just see, it would have been plain glass. So you can just see the outline of the original window there, that like little set of teeth at the top there, coming around. You can see where they put the new arch in to make that there. Originally, the windows would have all been plain glass. I'll show you the picture of what it used to look like before the renovation. That's what the windows would have looked like originally.
Right.
And when Ellis Gowen,
But it was cold.
one of the biggest Ellis Gowen came and he wanted to make a church a cathedral, he got all the businesses involved in Southend to give him some money and pay for a window. And so the windows are all dedicated to various big families who donated towards the life of the church. So as you look at the bottom there, you'll see each of the family names. Any questions so far? You're doing well. So we'll get moved on. Okay, you ready for a little walk round?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the figures is out, don't bring it on the telly. Because I've done that, fell over the telly actually, it's as it is, you can lose it. Obviously there is a photo with the wooden, with the roof on it, and obviously it was changed this one, on the side of the
Sorry.
There is a booklet for all the windows that I can email to Sue after round if you want. Tells you all about the windows, what's in each pane, what in each building. You're ready? Come and sit yourselves in this little area here in the sanctuary. So it's comfortable, we'll have a chat about this bit. And we'll go through to that bit, we'll go down there.
So I got all the moving around things.
This is Paul, the vicar, by the way. Yeah, we've forgotten the services. Paul does all the God stuff. He's got the important job. He's in communication with the boss. So the way the church works is obviously the vicar's in charge of everything. He runs with his two church wardens, and then there's a committee called the Parochial Church Council, and in consultation with each other we decide on the finances, the building, and what we need to do for the good of the church. What to do with
Are
the money.
the finances in good health or just...
As always, we always need money. Every church,
Oh,
whether
right,
rich
yeah.
or poor, always needs money. That's the way of things, unfortunately. It costs a fortune to heat the building, put the lights on, running rates, and we also have the privilege of having to pay the Church of England £70,000 a year just to be part of the Church of England. So they don't give us anything at all, we give them work. It takes about...
Oh,
Did you just say about council tax?
No, we have to pay the Church of England £70,000 for the privilege of being a church in the Church of England.
Disgusting, isn't it? What do they do with it?
They give it around to churches who aren't as rich as we are, and they pay for vicars who don't have the finances to support themselves,
Makes
I
you
guess.
wonder.
So
They
do
don't
all
have Mary's name, do they?
All churches of the Church of England pay what's called the parish share. The idea being that the rich churches support the poor churches, and everyone has an equal share of money to help them.
So some
carry
pay
on their
less
worship.
than others and some pay more. So there are churches that will pay more than 70,000 as well.
Yes, they are. Yes, it worked out on a demographic of who your population are, your attendance figures, and so on.
Right.
I think it's publicly issued. I think although we pay 70, I think we only have to pay 45 to 50, something like that. So we don't have to pay, but we pay more to support other churches who are not as fortunate as we are.
Yeah, pardon.
Most of the people volunteers. Only the vicar and the administrator gets paid. Everyone else gives up their time in the hope of a better life afterwards. None of us want to cash in early. We're all happy to wait. So what you're looking at here, in this part of the church, this is the story of Jesus' life as a child. So it starts off with his birth, being presented to the chapel there by this window is an add-on window. It's not the original window. This was added by the Wallace family, and it depicts the nativity scene. But it would have originally been the four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I'll start with you there. That's the original window behind me. That's what it would have been. Those four windows have been moved. They're now down by the end of the church. We'll look at those when we get down there. So this is the original windows. They took them out, and you can see, you can't really see it from here, you probably can, but that window is not in the middle. That top window is in the middle, but that window isn't in the middle. And the reason for that is when they put the window in, that window wasn't viewing. You couldn't see that window because this was all boarded out in dark wood. I have got a picture of that. Remind me, I'll show you. So this ceiling wouldn't have been to view. It would have been all boarded out, right the way down to across the archway there. So you wouldn't have seen the whole arch. It would have been boarded out in dark oak with a crest on the front. And when they took the boards down, they discovered this vaulted roof, and they painted it up. Any ideas how old the roof is?
Must be with the original, isn't it? Original.
It's not original. The roof's not original. You can see as you look around the angels, all depicting the parts of the crucifixion, 30 pieces of silver, spears and that. So this roof was 1965. It was painted in the Tudor style with the Tudor rose, and it's all hand painted. It's not wallpaper. It looks like wallpaper, but it isn't. It's all hand painted in gold. There's the Saxon arch there. Obviously that would have been the original entrance to the church. This layout here wasn't here. This has all been added on a bit later on during the period life of the church. And the organ itself wasn't there originally. It was along that way, and they've moved it this way. Before they put that organ in, there was another organ down there, which I'll show you. So we've got this nativity window added by the family, and then it finishes with Jesus as a teenager being taught in the temple there by the prophets. So this is all about the life of Jesus and his childhood.
So what was the size of the original?
Sorry?
What was the size of the original church?
Probably just to those back pews there, I would imagine. It's like very small, very small. I don't know if you've been down to St Andrews. I think that's a small church as well. Down by Shoebury. Down in Shoebury.
Oh,
Oh,
gosh.
There's yeah, I think that's like it. There's the Golden Eagle, obviously. It's been moved many, many times. Any questions on this part? The reason you're so low down is because you're sitting in the children's pews where the children of the choir used to sit, and the frontal that's in front of the pews there would have been along here. So when you look at that one, you can see they've all carved their name in it and put bits of. So, any questions on here? No. Happy? Let's move on into what we call the Jesus Chapel. Jesus Chapel. Look at the back of the organ and the organ pipes. Thank you. Get yourselves nice and comfy. Okay. The window, let's talk about the window first. The window you're looking at here is from the time of the French Revolution, the glass has. So the glass was from a church called St Owen in Paris, northern parts of Paris and suburbs there. Just before the French Revolution, during the church was sacked, but they managed to get all the glass and save it and transport it over to this country here, where it was sacked in the cellar of someone's big house and then dedicated to a neighbour.
And they haven't asked for it back.
And they haven't asked for it back, and it didn't arrive.
Thrown over your garden.
So they're like classic and ancient views of the Bible. So you've got Nebuchadnezzar there, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, those of you who remember the songs of the old days, in the fiery furnace. They didn't burn, so Nebuchadnezzar became a Christian faithful person there, then down in Babylon. And obviously there's the devil there tempting Jesus in the gardens. He doesn't appear much in church, but in the red robes with their hood on, that's that depiction there. These are the bishops who have been part of this church history and obviously glorified themselves in windows. And the one at the end is quite unusual because it's almost a glass photograph rather than a stained glass depiction of the face. So you can actually see what he would have looked like rather than an artistic impression. Ellis Gowan, one of the former vicars, became a bishop, and he was very, very, very fond of this church. He was an Australian, and he loved this church and wanted to make it a cathedral. So him and his family, they dedicated this window here, which you can't see the sunlight shining through, to his family. So they're all they're all parts of the Bible, people from the Bible, but they're also pictures of Australia. You've got the kangaroo in the corner there, stained glass kangaroo. You've got the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Wollondilly Creek, and Sydney Harbour there, and Porters, or the house where the bishops live now, which I think is down in Southend, just by the fly under. So that's the Australian window. This is called the Jesus Chapel. Anyone know what's called the Jesus Chapel? Jesus. I tell you why, because most churches have a lady chapel attached to the side that's dedicated to St Mary. But because the whole church is a lady chapel dedicated to St Mary, this chapel is the Jesus Chapel, and it's done in red and gold to symbolise the blood that was shed for our sins by Jesus. That's why it's all in red, always in red.
Can I ask you about this?
baby? Is that
This little baby here.
is that Moses?
I have no idea, but it is. It is in the guide for the windows, which we can pick those up down there, and it'll tell you what each of those little frames are and what they're depicting. So, sorry about that.
That's all right.
There's so much to think about.
Yeah, cool.
Just over here in the corner is the original hand washing station, where the vicar would wash his hands before doing communion. The French is piscine, of course, that's what they always call it, and I think that's Latin for same as they call swimming pools for washing and bathing. And those crosses there, they normally go outside during Easter. We've got 3 holes in the ground there, and we put them outside so everyone can remember as they walk by.
Would these have had statues?
This would have had a statue in it, obviously over a period of time that statue's been moved or lost or not popular at the time, so they've been taken down. You'll find a lot of little niches, especially as we go down to down there. There's a couple of niches where the statue should be. If you look at the tower, if you walk around outside, you'll see there's St Peter and St Paul either side in those statues, as a nod to how it would have looked if we'd have had statues in those niches there. So, okay.
Can I ask, you said the previous vicar wanted this to be a cathedral.
Yes.
Southend is now a city,
Yes.
so why didn't it happen?
It hasn't happened. There's talks of it happening. There's been talks of it happening for years. It hasn't happened because A, there's one at Chelmsford already, and B, there's the politics and the money and who's going to run it and the
Because
usual.
to be a city, you have to have a cathedral.
No, that's not true.
That
That's a
used to
QI.
be.
That's a QI rumour. That is.
Is it?
Yeah. I just talked to my little QI elves. No, that's actually not true. You don't have to have a cathedral, and to be a city, you don't have to have a college or a clock tower or run your sheep over a bridge at certain times.
Just happens to be that every single one of them's got a cathedral.
It's not a requirement, and there's no compulsion. They are talking about making this a cathedral again, but it's the politics, the finance, and the staffing and running of it. And of course, the minute they make it cathedral,
You'd have to give them more money.
they won't get money from us because we won't be here, or we'll be we won't be able to run this as a cathedral. They'll bring their own people in and run it. So the vicar will have to go because it has to be bishop. So we're not in a rush for that.
No, definitely not.
It would be nice to be a cathedral. It's big enough to be a cathedral.
Why do other people have to come in and run it as a cathedral and you can't?
The Church of England is a very, very, please don't record this, the Church of England is a very peculiar animal. It has its rules and regulations, its canons, its politics, its finances, and its ancient tenets of how it should be run and how it shouldn't be run, and it's quite precise on who should do what and where.
And very slow to change.
You said that, I didn't. Like all of the main religious, like the Catholic Church, the Jewish Church, the Muslims, they all have their own way of running things and doing things. They have their own rules, their own laws, and their own understanding of how God works. And that may not translate very well down to us, but I'm sure I have faith that they know what they're doing. I shall leave that there. You're not allowed to lie, church. Okay.
We need to move on.
Anything else you want to, while we're here, before we move down to the next bit?
No.
You happy so far?
Yeah.
No burning questions?
No.
No? You all happy? Okay, let's go on to the next bit then. These flags that you see dotted around, they're from the Second World War, and they were given to the church by church members. There's little plaques underneath to tell you all about them. Mind these steps as you come down. You go past them, you can tell you. I'm going to tell you an interesting fact of this window here. In this window here, you'll notice the sky is that indigo mauve violet colour, that dark colour at the back there. Yeah? That colour was on the windows over there and over there, and they decided that that colour was too dark for those windows, made it really, really dark. So they took out all of that indigo coloured glass and put in that antique glass that you can see the little pink shimmery diamonds. So they made those a lot brighter than they were originally. Originally they all had this dark blue indigo colour around them. So you can see there's been lots and lots of changes as we go through. One of the main changes was the arches where you're standing under. You'll notice there's 1, 2, 3. You can probably see it better as we walk down from this side. There are 3 lovely ornate Victoriana style arches. Nice and slender, nice and slim onto the columns. And then it changes to that chunky brickwork at the end. Simple reason is nothing clever, they ran out of money. Got to the end, ran out of money, and just punched an arch through the original Norman wall, which would have been in outside of this now. So that would have been the intention for the whole church, and then they changed it. Well, the man changed it. So as we go down, we've got different things in the windows. This one is some pole on the road.
As churches go.
He's having an epiphany there. Got his speech to him from the clouds. He's the only one who can hear it, that everyone else has got bothered. No one's saying, what's he looking at? They'll just go about their business. These are all Victorian interpretations, so what you see is the Victoria's idea of what it would have been like in those days, and the opulence. Particularly as you come down to the rainbow window, you'll see what the Victorians thought of the general public and their eyes views. This is possibly the most famous Saxon of them all. Anybody? Yeah. King Alfred. Yeah. He's actually the first one to have a navy to keep off the Danes and the Vikings. And you can see his seal above him there, which is in the Ashmolean Museum. The coat of arms for Essex. Anybody know why we have that particular coat of arms for Essex with the 3 axes? No. You might be surprised to know that the Saxons were actually called Saxons because of the swords they used to carry, and those are the swords they used to carry, and they were called sea axes. So they called them the Saxons, the Saxons. So you have, now we have Essex, which is East Saxon. You have Wessex, which is West Saxons. So we have East Saxons, West Saxons, Essex, Wessex. Fortunately, they didn't go north, otherwise you'd have no sex. So we have the folk in the north. We have the north folk and the south folk in the north, rather than the Saxons. So we have 3 Saxons there to remember the Saxons who were like the first dwellers of this area of Essex, East Saxon. Yeah, I think that's probably that. Anything else? Any questions on that? No? We'll talk about the rainbow window. This is obviously Jesus, the light of the world, and the traditional use of the rainbow, which was to signify to Noah that there was dry land and all was good. Obviously Noah was not part of the LGBTQ plus people at the time. They had adopted that rainbow, but it is traditionally ours, or Noah's. And at the bottom there, you can see what the Victorians thought the populace looked like. So you've got a road mender like you get from Mary Poppins, with his trousers tied up with a lump of cement on the end of the stick for road bending. You've got the little African boy there in the stripy clothes. This is what they thought people looked like, or should look like, in their mind's eye. Weird and wonderful. It's like a Disneyland ideal of people, isn't it? So if you all come into this part here, with your backs to the wall, we're going to talk about this particular part of the wall now. Please.
So all the windows were plain
All the windows were plain
until
the 1870 restoration, or just there off 1960s really. And they're all added in as a way of making money. Or like, give us some money, we'll stick a window up with your name on it. And obviously people of the time loved all that. The town criers and the people of the city and the mayor and bowler hats and brass plaques and their name everywhere, making themselves important. So that's why.
There's only one lady in there.
That's Victorians for you, isn't it? Yeah, the others all down the shops, perhaps. The other ladies all down the shops. So what you're looking at here is an outside wall. So this would have been the outside wall of the Norman church. And there would have been statues in the archways. These arches wouldn't have been here. There would have been an ordinary traditional door in the middle there. And this would have been the original outside wall. So where you're standing now, you'd be out in the graveyards, out in the cold. This part was then added on when religion became popular again by the Jesus Guild. So the Jesus Guild paid for this aisle to be added onto the church, which is like slightly different to the rest of the church. Every church, every Christian church, Church of England church that is built from the medieval times, has a cross, a consecration cross, built into the walls. The one for this church is as you go outside, if you look at the tower, to the right of the tower there are some buttresses. On those buttresses there is a cross in flint, quite a distinctive big cross in flint. And that's the cross for this church's dedication. Somewhere here, and I'll give you a clue, it's between where I've turned the lights off so you can see, there is a dedication cross on that wall. I'll give you a few minutes to have a look, see if you can see it. And then by the power of my laser torch, I shall point it out.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody can see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? No?
And that would have been on the outside of the...
This is the outside, yeah. The cross is here. In this stone here, there is a little cross. Can you see the little cross? So that's the dedication cross for the Norman chapel, Norman part of the church. And you can now see the different arches where they've gone down. Okay, we're doing well. We've got about 10 minutes, is that right? Is that all right?
Don't rush.
This doorway here, it's a very short spiral doorway, it's very dangerous if you don't go up there. It goes up to a small chapel above the doorway. It's a chapel dedicated to St Michael and St George, St George and St Michael. I keep getting in trouble because I keep calling it the George Michael Chapel. But it's actually dedicated to St Michael and St George. There is a military order called the Order of Michael and George, first brought in by Churchill and Lord Fisher, the Sea Lord, and it's the first written communication where he says, I see you've created a new order, OMG, oh my God. So it's the first time OMG has been written before the text took it over as their phrases. So as you go out into the porchway here, this is along with the cross outside. The cross outside is in a heart-shaped base. This and the cross outside are registered war memorials in the wars. And all the people who served from this borough pretty well are mentioned here, and all of the military so on and so forth. The windows are a nod to King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So you've got Arthur, Galahad, Lady of the Lake, just in there, giving out the Excalibur the sword. The initiation to the Round Table by taking the sword out of the stone, not the Disney film, slightly different. And you've got George and Michael here, St George, St Michael, slaying the dragon or the devil, as you can see in the tracery underneath. The black and white pictures underneath are called tracery. Those who like stained glass, they're their favourites, possibly the oldest.
It's beautiful.
Just near the Holy Scoot, where we used to have the water where you could make so many crosses we came in. And this door here is an original 15th century Tudor door from the time of Henry VIII, who never came here, he just sent people to come steal all our treasure. It still works, we've still got the key, but that's still, technically for insurance purposes we have to go and close, and if you take this ramp up, move this and dig a you can shut it, so technically it's a bit of effort. Let's leave this on to the font, symbolising that union and acknowledging their marriage, if you like, if you will. It's a lead-lined font, but we have got a purpose-made ceramic bowl inside, if you want to look at that. It's not its original place, it's been moved like everything else. I have got some pictures, if you've got time I can show you. The font was originally here, where there's a little hole in the wall, little archway there, and that's where the oils would have gone for the cushion. So the altar was originally here before the 18th century restoration.
I reckon I was christened in that.
You probably were.
I was, yeah,
You
because
probably were.
we live in this area.
This window here was dedicated by all the people who got christened. This is the
I
children.
didn't ask me.
So everyone who got christened,
I'm giving them 50 pence.
yeah, they probably just took your rattle and sold it.
I don't think I had one, to be honest. Yeah, go on.
So what we've got there is baby Jesus being presented by a child, by Mary, and by St Nicholas, the boy there. Anybody know St Nicholas of St Nicholas? Absolutely right. And just above his head is the 3 bags of gold, which is the gift he gave to the ladies for their dowries when they got married, which is how the traditional Christmas presents started. He was made red and white by the Coca-Cola company, who then tried to copyright it and failed miserably. Most ancient European towns have St Nicholas or Father Christmas in green and white. Over here and in America we have red and white. You've got St Mary's Church there, cockles and mussels all the way around, depicting the life of Southend and its historical port, coast and sea history. This door here used to lead to a schoolroom, which is just outside. You can see the remains of it. And this would have been where the priests would have come in and out, the Jesus Guild, for the services here. This window is the original window that was behind the altar. It's got the 4 Gospels, and there is John, and underneath John is the eagle.
Lovely colour.
Beautiful, aren't they?
Oh, it's beautiful. That
Yeah,
one.
beautiful.
Really lovely.
What you're looking at here is not a gallows. This is the bell ringing room. Just above the tower there, you'll see a hatchway. That hatchway is
There's
this
not
floor.
communal hanging.
No. All of these, like I say, these are all the bells. There are 10 bells, the smallest one being the size of a Fiat 500.
Wow.
Every Sunday morning we have the bell rings ringing the service in. Every Saturday there's a school. If you want to learn to bell ring, come along on a Saturday morning. They'll teach you to learn for free. And every Monday they have bell practice Monday nights.
Cool.
So that's the bell ringing room just above the tower, and those windows are opposite part of the tower. Just up here, the top part there is acknowledgement of the fact that Prittlewell was the main town, and because of its business and its transport links with the sea, it became the Southend, which became popular in the south end of Prittlewell, and became a town in its own right in 1909. It became Southend-on-Sea. As you know, on-sea means it's an estuary town where the water is brackish. It's Candy Island, the Thames turns into the sea. So we are on sea, we are in the sea, but because it's an estuary town, we are on sea. So most on seas are an estuary town. Okay, let's go to the last little bit. You're doing well, we're nearly done. If you look up as you come through, you can see the original windows of the Norman chapel here. They were discovered when they took the plaster down. You can see the one just by the light fitting there, still bricked in. This will be covered in plaster, bricked in, and they dug them out in the 1870 restoration, so you can actually see how that would have worked. It wouldn't have had this vaulted ceiling, it would have been a flat ceiling. You would have been able to have access to the loft, which is why those windows up there are there. They were light to the loft, but they're going to have been stained glassed in. So, if you just turn and look at this archway here,